Hello everyone, my name's Jacob Wilson, and I'm going to talk to you about a real interesting topic today, a real controversial topic, and that's HMB. So, as many of you know, HMB is probably one of the most controversial supplements that has been out on the market for the last 2 decades. Some people say it works, some people say it doesn't, some people compare it to drugs and made jokes about it. So we recently published a paper in European Journal of Applied Physiology on the impact of 12 weeks of HMB-Free Acid supplementation on muscle mass, strength, and resistance training individuals. So we performed a randomized double-blind placebo-controlled trial, and we saw some really great results. And so that's what's caused the controversy. Well, what I want to do today is break down exactly a theoretical model for how we designed this study and why we theorize these results happened. I also want to address some of the articles which have had critiques against this. So here we go. Well, as you guys know, HMB has been used as an ergogenic aid for a long time to enhance strength, power, and hypertrophy. In addition to that, it was introduced first by EAS, by the great Bill Phillips in the 90s, and it was first advertised as the most amazing supplement since creatine. Jeff Stout, actually one of my really good friends, who's also a co-author on the paper, one of the top researchers in the world in sport nutrition, also published a paper on this in about 16 years ago. So Jeff and I have both studied HMB for a long time, and again, we're co-authors on this paper. But what is the real scoop? What's the real scoop behind HMB? What's the reality behind it? Let's get into that. Today's purpose is sort of give you a new scoop on HMB supplementation. All science should be theory-driven, right? It should be theory-driven. So we have to come up with theory in order to make predictions. So what my theory has been, and my brother actually, and Auntie Menina, Dr. Auntie Menina and Dr. Gabe Wilson and I published a paper on this theoretical model in Nutrition and Metabolism Journal about 6 years ago. And what we theorized was that the training stimulus interacts with muscle adaptations, but HMB interacts with both of those. So it's not a supplement that's on its own. Okay, it interacts with the training stimulus. So let's talk about training. For those of you guys who have a background or don't have a background in resistance training, I'm going to give you a little background. The first is linear progressive resistance training. Okay, in linear training, in essence, you increase the weight, but you're not increasing the undulation, or you're not changing the rep scheme or the rest period lengths. So in this example, weeks 1 through 4, 3 by 10 repetitions, 100 pounds, weeks 4 through 8, up the weight, weeks 9 through 12, up the weight again. It's a linear increase, right? So what most strength coaches use is a periodized model. And basically in a periodized model, what happens is that the traditional long-term periodized model, you start off with a really high volume, low to moderate intensity, and you finish before your event with very high intensity, very low volume. So we're modulating, we're alternating these intensities, these volumes for this undulating model called periodization. Now this is traditional periodization. A more recent occurrence or use of periodization is non-linear or non-traditional periodization. And what you can notice here is that here the workout might change from week to week and even as drastic as day to day. Okay, so one of my colleagues, and you can see that here actually, 12 to 15 reps, maybe 5 reps, and then 8 to 10 reps, that 1 to 3 reps, you know, they always change. So Monteiro out of Sao Paulo University worked with Dr. Carlos Ugrinowicz out of his lab, one of the best labs in Brazil. And Carlos is a really good friend of mine. And what they did was they compared non-periodized to linear periodized. So if you look at the pre-group, non-periodized is the white, linear is the gray, non-linear is the dark gray. So what you see is if you look at strength, the non-linear group produced superior results in these trained individuals. Now, in untrained people, essentially, both linear and non-linear or traditional and non-traditional work about the same. But in these highly trained people, they need more variation. Okay, so that's very, very important. And again, you can see the gains were greatest when you had the non-linear. So take that in consideration. Very important. So one of the first classic studies on HMB was a 3-week study. Neeson took essentially 0, 1.5, and 3 grams of HMB and looked at changes in total body strength while training. And you can notice a dose-dependent response. More HMB is more strength gains, up to 3 grams. Now what that optimal dose is controversial, and we can talk about that at a later date. So this is percent change in lean body mass after 3 weeks, and the Neeson study is about 2.25, and then you see it goes up to about 3% after an 8-week study. So this is kind of indicating like, oh wait, as you become more trained, the effects of HMB appear to be blunted. Okay, but in reality, what's going on is that both the Neeson study and the Gallagher study are linear models. They use linear models. That means they're not changing it from workout to workout. They're just using progressive overload. We know that leads to staleness and stagnation and a decrease in overall muscle damage. So here, this is a great study, okay, and this was published by William J. Kramer. Now, William Kramer is been the world's #1 scientist in strength and conditioning for the past 3 decades. He heads up the University of Connecticut's program, which has been the #1 research program in our field for years. Every graduate student is on a wait list to go to UConn. And it's a dream to go study with Dr. William Kramer, who's also editor-in-chief of the National Strength Conditioning Association. Now, he published this paper. He did the first periodized training program with HMB, okay, and he did it over 12 weeks' time. It was a non-linear program, and he took people, and these were untrained people or recreationally trained people, and essentially what he did was he changed the workout from day to day and from week to week. So it was a non-linear program. The group on the HMB gained 9 kilograms of lean mass. 9 kilograms of lean mass. What this is suggesting is that HMB works ideally under conditions of novelty. And nonlinear periodization keeps novelty high. Okay, but again, look at that picture, 9 kilogram increase. It's a lot of muscle, or it's not a lean body mass anyway, over 12 weeks' time. All right, why is this happening? Why is periodized model better than non-periodized model? Well, we really have to kind of understand that by understanding the mechanisms of action. And one of the things that my brother Gabriel, Dr. Gabriel Wilson, and I have teamed up on is I got my PhD in skeletal muscle physiology, and Gabriel got his PhD in nutritional sciences. And what we've tried to do is kind of really look together from different angles on how exercise interacts with supplementation, so that you know how to prescribe ideally what supplement to use. So what are the mechanisms of action? The first is that if you understand, protein balance is protein synthesis minus protein breakdown. So when synthesis exceeds breakdown, you essentially hypertrophy. Okay? So any of those variables, if a supplement can impact them, you can impact hypertrophy. Now, we know from Neeson's data here that essentially, if you look at the control, the 1.5 and the 3 grams, they're looking at protein breakdown. Protein breakdown decreases in a dose-dependent fashion with HMB. And actually, back when I was at Florida State University, I looked at the gene responses of HMB. So I used to study its cellular and molecular effects. And And basically what we saw was that it inhibited a pathway called the ubiquitin pathway. So it's a really interesting thing, but it definitely decreases protein breakdown. And this is mTOR signaling. This is a paper that actually a former postdoc of mine, Dr. Nello Zonki, had. And what he showed was that HMB increased mTOR signaling. And we know that's protein synthesis. So it's augmenting protein synthesis, decreasing breakdown. Phil Atherton more recently showed that HMB, again, simultaneously increases synthesis and breakdown at the same time. Okay, this is a study by Cornasio, and essentially what they found, if you look to the lower right, is that HMB is increasing intramuscular growth factors. And you look to upper right A, it's increasing growth and differentiation factors. So these factors are very critical for regeneration of damaged tissue. What does this mean? It's going to enhance regeneration. So if Van Someren in 2005 did an eccentric elbow flexor bout, the placebo group went up in muscle damage, that's the red, but the HMB didn't even increase in muscle damage at all. So it's speeding recovery, which is going to heal a muscle. So HMB works ideally with three different conditions. The first is that you have to have a high amount of protein breakdown, you have to have an increase in muscle damage, or you have to suppress, or you have to be in a situation where protein synthesis might be suppressed, such as dieting or cardio. Okay, so, but one of the problems is this concept known as the repeated bout effect. So this is a simple study that we did a while back. All we did is we had guys train their arms week 1, and you see that muscle damage was up. Okay, that's where you see it elevate. But week 2, we repeated the same protocol, no muscle damage. Okay, this is called the repeated bout effect. And what it says is that a trained individual becomes resistant to damage. Okay, so this is why HMB's been said not to work as well in trained people. So Kreider, there was a study by Kreider in 1999. There was actually a Wilson on that paper. That Wilson was not me. I was actually in high school at that time. But I know a recent article said that I was on that paper. But again, I was in high school. So Kreider comes out in 1999. And what he finds is that giving HMB for 28 days, there was no change in muscle mass, strength, or decrease in muscle damage. Okay, indicating it doesn't work in trained people. However, the problem is that the athletes were instructed to maintain their same training volume and intensity. And the placebo or the HMB group had no increases in muscle damage. So, and they made no gains. So that means what it's basically saying is if you have a maintenance stimulus, HMB is not going to be beneficial. So this is our model. This is a model that Ryan Lowry and I came up with. If you look at the very bottom of this graph, it's showing the interaction between HMB and muscle damage, with the control condition being the blue and the HMB condition being the red. So if you look at muscle damage here, on the bottom, if you use a non-periodized program, HMB might help at the beginning of a program because it's novel at the beginning. But if you don't change it up, you're not going to get the same damage response because you're going to get a repeated bout effect. So HMB is not going to be as beneficial. So if you look at the second part of that graph, HMB in a non-periodized program might help with hypertrophy early on, but then it's going to plateau. However, if you use a nonlinear model, such as is in the third aspect of this graph, or second to the top, you can see that muscle damage is maintained, and so HMB is able to essentially work with that training stimulus because novelty remains high, and therefore at the top hypertrophy is higher. So this was our model. So how do we create a lot of muscle damage? Well, I'll be honest with you. Squats, deadlifts, bench press, dips, military press, compound hardcore movements. I don't care how tough you are. One thing that Carlos Ugrinowicz once told me is I don't care how tough you are, the repeated bout effect is like a bulletproof vest. There's always a bullet that can bust through that vest. And so squats, deadlifts, and bench press provide that bullet. So there's a new form of HMB. It's called HMB-Free Acid. So if you look, this was published by Fuller. If you look at the this graph, you can see HMB rising up in the free acid group, and that's the one that's rising up much quicker. It's peaking at about 20 to 30 minutes and staying elevated higher in the blood. And then you have the calcium, which takes about 90 to 120 minutes to peak. So the kinetics are much different. And one thing we know from some molecular signaling, for example, with the parent molecule of HMB, leucine, is that the faster that leucine rises up in the blood, the greater the stimulus and protein synthesis is. We also see greater retention of HMB-free acid in the tissues. However, this has not been investigated to a large extent until recently. So we published a study in the British Journal of Nutrition. This is a very high impact journal, one of the most respected nutrition journals in the field. And what we did was we basically took guys, we had them bench, squat, deadlift, military press, so they hit about 40,000 pounds. And these were resistance trained guys. If you look at the pre-group, that's their levels of muscle damage. We looked at creatine kinase. If you look at the post-group, the placebo went up more in muscle damage than the HMB group. So basically, it's speeding recovery, even in resistance-trained athletes. So we took this model and undulated it in our next study. Okay, so our next study was based on 3 concepts. How do we maintain muscle damage long term? 1, periodization, the need for continual variation. 2, high-intensity resistance training. And 3, overreaching. Okay, this is what we, Wilson, and Meninen postulated in 2008. So this is our new research. We took 20 resistance-trained men. Now, one thing that I want to point out to you is this. These were very unique individuals. Okay, what we did was we put them through the most brutal protocol you could imagine possible. I can't even describe how brutal this protocol is. And so what we did was for an entire semester, we filtered through individuals who we felt that were mentally and physically able to withstand this brutal bout of training. Now, they were trained, but they had not reached their genetic potential. All of these guys were genetically outstanding. You could tell they had full muscle bellies. They're essentially jacked. Okay, and you could tell that they were extreme responders to training. Now, in most studies, you just recruit anybody, and you could have non-responders, moderate responders, high responders. We filtered so that we had purely high responders to training. Okay, and just to give you the filtration process, we ended out with 24 resistance-trained men. 4 we lost during the study because of injury. However, to filter those 24 out, we literally screened over 100 applicants for the study. That means we had greater than a 75% cut rate to get these subjects. This is the most meticulous recruitment process that I've ever been a part of, and that I even know of in the literature. Okay, so you see that's a subject in our study. We did a 12-week daily undulating periodization protocol. So based on squats, bench, deadlifts. Monday was hypertrophy based, average of 50,000 pounds. Wednesday we did a power workout. Friday we did heavy. So on Monday was one of the most brutal protocols you can imagine. Guys were just completely gassed. They didn't know what hit them. They didn't know what hit them. They had never experienced anything like what they experienced in this study. And if you look at the muscle damage values in the European Journal of Applied Physiology, you'll see exactly what we mean, as well as the perceived recovery values. So what we did was we changed the repetition scheme from workout to workout, and we changed it from week to week. So they essentially never had a chance to adapt. And we did that for 8 weeks. Okay? We also, at week 8, essentially, we gave these individuals what's called an overreaching cycle. And I'll explain to you the overreaching cycle in a second. But that was from weeks 8 and 9, and then weeks 9 and 10, and then weeks 11 and 12 we tapered them. So what I want to point out is this. This study was meticulous. We registered it in clinical trials. We did every precaution to make this study the most meticulous, hardcore, scientific, unbiased study you could possibly have. And one of the things I put in the manuscript is that it was blinded. So blinding occurred by an outside researcher who sent an isocaloric and identical looking supplement and placebo. This was divided in 3 servings daily. This researcher was not involved in direct data collection, statistical analysis, and did not meet any of the subjects. For this reason, neither the researchers conducting the study nor the subjects knew which participant was assigned to which group. Okay? Moreover, the code was not broken until all of the data were entered into a computer spreadsheet and sent to an outside researcher who was also blinded to the treatment groups. In addition, everyone in my lab had access to this data. Everyone saw it, and it was entered in real time. That means that it is flawless. Okay, so, everything was done by the book. So during the overreaching phase, we did this. We took guys, and we had them lift an average of 40,000 pounds on Monday through Thursday. So what they did basically was bench, squat, deadlift. Actually, a lot of the guys were lifting up to 60,000 pounds because it was dependent on their 1RMs. But they essentially did bench, squats, deadlifts, leg press, and every workout was hypertrophy because we wanted to cause extreme fatigue Monday through Thursday. On Friday, they did a powerlifting event where they did 3 maximal attempts on the squat, the bench, and the deadlift for a total of 9 maximal sets. And on Saturday, we did Wingate sprints. Now, for those of you who don't know what Wingate sprints are, this is how we did them in our lab. And this will show you the intensity of our lab.
1, go! Go! Go, Joe! Get it up! Push! Harder, Joe! Come on! Finish! Go! Go!
So that's in my lab.
Go!
That's one of my students.
Push harder! Push harder, Joe! Come on, you got more in you!
And that's the intensity that we train people
Do not
at.
slow down! Get it up! Get it up, Joe!
10 seconds, come on!
Breathe! Come on! Finish stronger!
6,
You are not
5,
Finish!
4, 3, 2, 1, gun!
That is intensity, and that's how we trained every subject every single day. Okay, so it's to another level that you can't even imagine unless you're in my lab. So this is what happened during the overreaching phase. I want to show you this before I show the long-term results. So basically, we killed them weeks 1 through 8, but at that point they had started to adapt. Now, if you look at our study, if you go to European Journal of Applied Physiology and look up our study, you'll see that we were able to maintain muscle damage from weeks 0 to 8, but HMB blunted this from weeks 0 to 8. So our protocol worked. We were able to recapitulate essentially what Kramer did in his study with untrained people by causing large disruptions in muscle tissue and forcing these individuals to face a stimulus they had not faced before. Now, once they had sort of adapted at week 8, we hit them with the overreaching phase. And if you look, the HMB groups in the black, the placebos in the checkered, notice that strength went down only a little bit in the HMB group, but it plummeted in the placebo group. I actually recently just reviewed a paper that found the exact same results as ours. Cortisol levels were much higher in the placebo group, indicating that they weren't recovering well. Okay, they were more stressed. And these results also replicate Kramer's study in 2009. And this is the muscle damage values using creatine kinase during the overreaching cycle. Notice that just like the British Journal of Nutrition, the muscle damage was cut down drastically in the HMB group. So essentially, what I want to emphasize that we did was, what I think with HMB you have to do is this, and this is what my lab sort of postulates. You have to push people to an extreme limit, to a limit they would not normally recover from workout 1 to workout 2. Okay? So if they train squats on Monday, and then they go train squats again on Wednesday, you need to set up a stimulus so that they're not recovered by Wednesday. Okay? However, it's overreaching just enough so that HMB can pull it back. So instead, the people who are on the supplement were recovered Wednesday. Same thing with Friday's workout. So what does that mean? It means that the people in the HMB group are training without being sore, without high amounts of damage, without being stiff. And they can handle greater loads and greater weight. It is that leads to the anabolic stimulus, not HMB. HMB simply speeds recovery. It is dependent on your ability to handle heavy loads and high volumes, which is prevented by being stiff and being sore and not being recovered. So that I have to emphasize that. People keep saying, oh, HMB is so anabolic. No. HMB speeds recovery. What is anabolic, the most anabolic, potent stimulus that you can have, is the training stimulus. So this is our long-term study. Ours is this from European Journal of Applied Physiology. This our graphs on the left here. So what you can see, Wilson et al. That's us. You can see that from weeks. The black is the HMB. The clear is the placebo. What you can see is that by week 12, placebo group went up 4.4% muscle mass, and the HMB went up 9.5%. Okay, or about 7 kilograms. But look at Kramer's study in 2009. They went up 15%, while the placebo went up 5%. So he got 9 kilogram increases. We got 7. So all we did, basically, both of our studies were 12 weeks. Both of them were nonlinear protocols. Both of them used the exact same diet because we controlled everyone's diet. And both repeated the same results. That is the hallmark of science. The hallmark of science is repeatability, period. And that's exactly what we did. This is not new. This is just a replication of what Kramer already showed in 2009. What's new is that we will replicate this in a trained population with our novel training protocol. Now look at Kramer's data in 2009 at Bodyfat. So the HMB group's the white, the black is the control. Notice body fat goes down over 12 weeks time in the Kramer study. Look at our study. The placebo goes down a little, the HMB group goes down more. Literally a direct replication of what Kramer found. That's 2 independent labs. One of those labs in UConn is the most respected lab in the world. And then our lab, in which last year I got Young Investigator of the Year award. So we do have a lot of respect in the field. And so that's what's going on. Okay. So what I want to emphasize is that there are a number of objections to this study that were published on, I don't know, is it ErgoPharm or ErgoLog or something like that. But anyway, these guys published actually, you know, it was kind of funny. I was amused when I read the article, and so are the people in my lab. So the first objection in my study is the study took a year to get published, right? So to me, this is laughable. Basically, any researcher, any scientist knows that a year to get a paper published is oftentimes the average. Okay? Sometimes I've seen researchers take 3 years to get a paper published. That's because it goes through the scrutiny of scientific peer review. Okay? And that process is absolutely the most brutal process there are, because you have 3 experts in the field reviewing that paper and reviewing everything, reviewing your data. They can request anything to look at, and they make a decision on the validity of that study. So, okay, it took a year to get published. That's just normal. Okay, that's just part of the scientific peer review process. That's how papers like ours get published in highly respected journals. Next, the next objection from ErgoLog was some authors on the poster presentation were not on the final paper. Okay? So basically, one thing I learned when I was a sophomore, actually as an undergraduate student, was that poster presentations are an opportunity for students to present. Okay? So if you had a non-essential role in the study, but you had a small role, you would get a chance to present data at a conference, at a poster. However, to be on the final paper, your role had to be essential. meaning the study couldn't happen without you. Okay, and so what will happen is that students on the poster will oftentimes not be on the final paper. Okay, so that's important to understand. That objective is just not a good argument. Next is that Wilson works for MTI, Dymatize, and Cheminutra, who all have a vested interest in HMB. Wilson gets paid if HMB works. All right, this is actually probably the most hilarious one I've seen. Actually, if you look here, I work at University of Tampa. That's who pays my paycheck. I do not work for MTI. I don't make a dime off of HMB. I don't make a dime off HMB sales. Not one single dime. And in fact, most of my studies that I've done have been, 90% of the studies I've done on HMB have been non-funded, which means that in reality I have a net loss of resources. But I study because I have a passion. Dymatize Nutrition doesn't even have HMB, and Cheminutra is an individual ingredient company that looks at phospholipids. So this argument completely breaks down, right? So the next one is that Wilson has been writing about HMB for years and even wrote a position stand on HMB, which makes him biased. All right, I love this meme. If I agreed with you, we would both be wrong, right? So let's have a reality check here. If someone writes a position stand, it means they have an expertise in the subject. Okay, I've studied HMB for numerous years. I have looked at it at the whole body, the cellular, and the molecular level. I have looked at it in humans, young and old, athletes and non-athletes, rats, mice, and even hamsters. So I am therefore qualified to make a position stand. How does that make me biased? It just makes me an expert in the subjects, and that gave me an expertise to design a protocol where HMB would actually work. Next thing is the results are better than DECA. I don't believe them. Okay, this is the most hilarious one I've ever seen. First off, people who say this, can you show me studies where you've taken DECA and testosterone and had guys train up to 200,000 pounds per week of total training volume? They're not out there. They're not out there. We don't know the full impact that something like DECA and testosterone could have on muscle size when people are actually training and dieting hardcore. That data is not out there. So this is really a ridiculous statement. There's a real good quote that Ryan Lowry showed me. And it says, if someone doesn't value evidence, what evidence are you going to provide to prove that they should value it? It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So the main thing that I want to emphasize, that I want to review, is this. One, I'm not saying HMB is this super anabolic substance. I'm not saying if you take HMB in 12 weeks you're going to gain 7 kilograms. Most likely you won't. Okay? What I am saying is this. If you're genetically gifted, like the select population of individuals that we selected for our study, meaning you're an extreme responder to training, if you are able to push yourself to levels that 99% of the population cannot push themselves, at that point, and if you are in a training camp for 12 weeks' time where you live, eat, breathe, and sleep training, at that point HMB can be beneficial. And as Kramer's and my lab have both replicated and shown, HMB can be extremely beneficial. Thank you for your time, and I'll be seeing you soon.